Can the law restrict if I want to change my religion as an adult? No. Who is going to tell me about my motivations? Can the law stop us, or should the law stop us?
Jesus never promised his followers an easy path. In fact, he told his disciples that the world would hate them. He sent them out as sheep among wolves. Jesus' words came true in the life of the apostles, and they're still coming true today in the lives of his followers around the world. Join host Todd Nettleton as we hear their inspiring stories and learn how we can help. Right now on the Voice of the Martyrs Radio Network.
Welcome again to the Voice of the Martyrs Radio. My name is Todd Nettleton, and we are coming to you from South Asia. We're going to have another of our one-name guests, as we often do. Sister Joti is a human rights lawyer in the nation of India. We're going to talk about what God is doing. We're also going to talk about the price that our brothers and sisters are paying because of anti-conversion laws, because of persecution that's happening here. Sister Joti, welcome to the Voice of the Martyrs Radio.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Well, we are very glad to have you. Give us the big picture as we look at the nation of India. I think now it's 14 states that have anti-conversion laws. What does that mean if you're a pastor, if you're an evangelist, and your state passes an anti-conversion law? How does that change your ministry?
It's a difficult question to answer, partly because India is a contradiction in terms. So many of the things that I say may not be true of some of the biggest cities. But as you move to the margins, these laws have a huge impact. They are actually in 12 states of India. And the laws say that every time there's a religious conversion, you have to inform the authorities. You need to tell them either 30 days in advance, 60 days in advance, that there's going to be a conversion ceremony. However, the mobs don't wait for that. They will show up at your home, they'll show up in your church, they will show up on the streets, and they will tell you that you are engaged in forcible conversion, and they will beat you up. Often these very mobs will call the police, and they will then ask for the police to arrest you, which the police does very, very promptly in these cases. So as of date, actually, we know of at least 80 such pastors who are in jail across the country, mostly in the northern states of India, where they have been accused of forcible conversion. What impact this has on your church, on your family, I mean, hugely traumatic. We know of so many churches that are shut down, that are closed, unable to function, people who are meeting instead via Zoom or WhatsApp calls because it's just too frightening for them to open up their churches on a Sunday. They know they will be attacked.
One of the things that I think for many of us from outside who are looking at this situation is the question about, okay, the Constitution says religious freedom, and then this law says if I want to change my religion, I need to warn the authorities 60 days ahead of time.
Yeah.
It seems like they would look at that and say, well, you can't do that because the Constitution says we have religious freedom. How do the authorities sort of balance those two things?
It's bizarre when you think about what the Constitution provides, and when you think about the context in which the Constitution was written, that specific provision was written. The law says that subject to public order, health and morality, so there are limitations, and other parts of the Constitution, so clearly limitations on the right. But everyone, American citizens who are being arrested in Maharashtra as we speak are also covered by the same protection as an Indian citizen. That you have the freedom of conscience, the right to practice, profess, and propagate the religion of your choice. So a very broad freedom that is being protected. And when you go back a little bit about why this provision was given in the first place in the Constitution, the framers of our Constitution were very, very clear. They said, Indian Christians, and they specifically say this in the Constituent Assembly debates, Indian Christians will want to share about their faith, and we have to be able to protect that right. In fact, some of the people said, well, you don't need it as a special right because that's already there as a freedom of speech and expression, that's already safeguarded as a fundamental right. They said, no, it's important. Indian Christians will want to share, and we know that they do it in a manner that is without pressure, without coercion. We know this about the community, and we want to protect their right to be able to do that. So when you think about that, and then you think about the anti-conversion laws, there's such a huge leap that has been made. And these laws don't operate in a vacuum. First there was attempts at a national law, subsequently there were these state laws, and they have been challenged even at the Supreme Court. I think in Reverend Stanley's laws, the Supreme Court did try to see how do you balance, the constitutional right that is being, freedoms that are being protected, and how do you try and make sense of these anti-conversion laws. And the court said, well, you do have a right to propagate your faith without doubt, but nobody should be forced to convert. So you don't have a right to convert someone. I have a right to propagate, but don't convert. It is a difficult line. It's a line in the sand, I think, which is hard to really articulate. But what the Supreme Court failed to do, and perhaps rightly so at the time, was because these laws were not restricting so much the right of the person converting. So there are two parties involved here. One is the person who is doing the baptism or sharing the gospel or whatever, but there's also the person who is receiving that message and wants to convert. And the court at that time did not consider the person who was wanting to change their religion. And we have to always think about that person. That person's right has to be protected. Yes, you may want to restrict what I say, but there can be never a restriction on what I believe personally, or I want to believe, especially when it comes to matters that do not impact in that sense or harm another person. Why should I not be able to believe that? And can the court really determine whether those beliefs are genuine? Not only the court, the administration, why I believe them, who has influenced me, what are my motivations? Who can know my mind apart from me?
We're talking this week on Voice of the Martyrs Radio with Sister Joti. She is a human rights lawyer in the nation of India, and we're talking about the anti-conversion laws. So when, let's say, a pastor in one of those states is arrested, and as you said, the mob gathers, they call the police come, instead of arresting the mob, they arrest the pastor who was just going about his business. I mean, ideally you would say this guy's never charged because he never committed a crime, but once he's charged, where do you expect to see somebody step in and say, well, wait a minute, the Constitution says we have religious freedom? Does that have to go all the way up to the Supreme Court? Or is there like a state court or somebody that will step in and hopefully stand up for religious freedom?
Immediately after somebody is attacked and they are arrested, they have to be brought before a court within 24 hours. That's the rule for a process of bail. So you should be able to say, this is not a crime at that point, and, get them out on bail at least. However, at that point, the courts are saying, listen, conversion is quite dangerous, and this may be mass conversion where there are more than two people involved, so the whole idea of conversion has become something that needs to be, the courts are concerned about, and they have said this repeatedly in judgment, so it's problematic. So at that point, but within 24 hours, you should be able to say that, listen, he was only distributing Bibles, he was only having a consensual conversation with someone or whatever, should be able to, or he was distributing biscuits or whatever it may be. So within that, otherwise, when the trial comes up, you would try and prove at that time, and that could be anywhere between a year from the arrest or 2 years, 3 years. We have had clients who've spent a whole year in jail before their case was heard. They were acquitted before they were bailed out. We have had several instances where people have spent at least 6 months in jail, 3 months in jail. Already that's a long period. I think where we really see relief coming in terms of the courts recognizing that these cases are false is we've handled several cases now over the years, and almost all of them have resulted in acquittals, and that will happen at the trial court. So the courts are saying, listen, this person had nothing to do with forcible conversion, etc., and has acquitted them, but they've already spent 2 months, 3 months in jail. There's no compensation for the time that they've spent. Their church may have got shut down in the process. Their family may have, been traumatized. None of that is being compensated for those false arrests. where there have been a few convictions. Especially in the recent year, because the law has also changed in its criminal jurisprudence, that now I have to show that I am innocent. So I have to show that the Bible that I carried to the meeting was not there to convert you, or the money I have in my wallet is not there to convert you. The biscuits I'm offering now are not there to convert you. It's extremely difficult. Why should I carry a Bible to the meeting except to convert you? Those are the kind of allegations that are being made against people. I gave you biscuits and tea at the end of our meeting because I wanted to convert you. I handed out pencils and notebooks because I wanted to convert you. I served meat at a wedding reception of my daughter because I wanted to convert you. How do you even how do you make sense of these allegations? So at the High Court, again, the courts are recognizing that and people are getting acquitted. So we have no final conviction. But these take years, the legal costs, the trauma on the family. And the Indian system is hostile. It takes time. It's tedious. Even if your case is not being heard, you will have to show up in court every month or at the police station to what we would call, to give your attendance. And the court and the police will make you sit in the corner, you've given your attendance. That whole shame that is associated, police showing up at your home, traumatic. We had some cases recently where 6 women were arrested. They were detained for over a month in prison. And the immediate thing that their family and neighbors told them was that, who will marry you now? You've spent a month in jail. People think you've done some terrible thing. And for a young woman in the back of beyond in India, that is one of the worst things that can happen, that you don't have this protection of marriage.
We're talking this week on Voice of the Martyrs Radio with Sister Joti. She is a human rights lawyer in India. How is the church responding to some of these restrictions and changes and outright persecution? Are they changing the way they have services? Are they changing the way they do outreach? Or is it just like they say, yeah, we're going to have to pay a price and we're going to pay it?
So it's a little bit of all of that. There are some churches, sadly, that have got shut down because they just find it too difficult to meet. So they've shifted online. There are some who have stopped doing outreach in certain areas, and maybe wisely so also, because it just means getting beat up, and you do need to consider the cost. It is difficult. So I completely understand that. Yet there are others who will say, this is what we've been called to, this is what we're supposed to do. How do we respond to this is by continuing to labor. And there are churches and people who are living in extremely hostile situations. And when you ask them why or how they are managing, they will say, well, Christ has brought us thus far and he will take us through. And that's it. Their faith shines through. And I'm not saying that those who back away are not acting. I think there is wisdom in withdrawing also. It is a biblical response to withdraw sometimes. But it's also a biblical response to stand. So you see both here.
We're talking this week on Voice of the Martyrs Radio with Sister Joti. She is a human rights lawyer in India. From the political standpoint of the Hindutva movement or the Hindutva political movement, does the average Indian voter support these kind of laws? Like when I stand up as a member of parliament and say, I'm going to get that anti-conversion law passed, is there a big upswing of political support for me, or is this purely motivated sort of by that Hindu radicalism kind of idea?
Of course, that political messaging is happening, but it is driving people to actually think that there is a problem that needs to be contained. You have created an enemy, you have created a problem, and now you're showing these anti-conversion laws as a solution to that. So there is some political buy-in from the community that these laws are needed, and it's so far away from what we see as within the Indian tradition, generally in culture. There is so much mingling of religions. These are communities, not new communities. Muslims have been here since Islam has been in this world. So, Christians have been here almost since 2000 years. The Jewish community has been here for centuries. The Zoroastrians, the Jains, the Buddhists. This is a land where there is a lot of religious, interaction. We've all grown up in India with people of different faith communities around us. We have learned to live like that. We have learned to respect and even adopt practices. So if you were to go to the Cathedral Church, which is one of the most prominent Catholic churches in Delhi, on Christmas Day, you will hardly find any Catholics there on Christmas Day. It is filled with people of other faith communities who are coming to, be in the church, to stand at the grotto, to light a candle, because that is what you do as a Hindu, as an Indian. You sort of go to all these places. So that is what is being attacked mostly. This idea that, you are contained. This is a problem that Hinduism is going to face, where it is becoming more fundamentalist because of a political movement. Of course, initially there may be bias, but actually eventually there will, and you're seeing this wherever a religion becomes too fundamentalist. You've seen it within the Christian religion, you've seen it in Islam. People will leave.
It seems like there's a lot of bad news.
Yep.
How do you, as a Christian, how do you stay encouraged, and how do you keep moving forward into wave after wave of what seems like bad news?
The work impacts real lives and real people, and to be able to see some of that impact is very, very encouraging and keeps you going. And also knowing that, this is not really our fight. It's God's fight. It's His problem. I'm here to serve for as long as I can, as long as He will allow me to do that. That's enough for me to be able to do that, and I will hold this front line for as long as I can. One of the questions that has kind of come up in my mind as we've been talking is the idea of conversion. As a Christian, I would say, I would point to the scripture that says, call on the name of the Lord and you will be saved. Right. That's kind of a momentary thing. Like, I called on the name of the Lord and I was saved. In the eyes of the government, or in the eyes of the people writing these conversion laws, what is that point that now you've done something illegal? Is it when you get baptized? Is it when you step your foot inside a church building, or what? Or is it so nebulous that you can just attack anyone? Yeah, exactly. That's the problem. When do you convert? Should it not happen in your mind before it happens as a physical act? And the law can never pinpoint that, which is why, like you said, it's so nebulous. The law cannot. So that's why they're saying, I'm carrying a Bible to a place, that means you're trying to convert. So the law can't answer that. It's impossible, which is why they sort of point to the conversion ceremony. So they are saying, okay, when you make a public declaration, etc., that is the point of conversion. And before that, it is all attempt to convert. But you're right, when does conversion happen? There's one case that is going on now. It's before a high court in one of the states in India, but will eventually come to the Supreme Court, where this man is saying that, listen, I watched YouTube videos. And I've watched not one, I've watched multiple YouTube videos where I've learned about the Christian faith, and I'm very influenced by the Christian faith. And I am a Christian. Now this law exists, and I don't know, the law says, tell me who your pastor is. I have no idea who my pastor is. And the administration is refusing to let his conversion happen, official conversion. So it's so bizarre. And what can the administration do also? Because they want a pastor because the form says pastor, and this is when I convert. And he's like, listen, I watched a YouTube video. If I, as a pastor, went to whoever I'm supposed to go to, the magistrate or whoever, and said, in 60 days, Sister Joti is going to come and she's going to convert, what would happen if you actually tried to follow to the letter what the law says? So there are many people who do that, who go and inform the people, because that's the only process they have, right? So they will go. But so what the magistrate is supposed to do is he's supposed to set up an inquiry. he will then have a board, or he can appoint people who will go and ask you why you're converting, what your former faith tradition was, how much money you earn, who is in your family, who's going to attend your baptism ceremony. And you're now being exposed in ways that, I want to not necessarily tell the whole world that I've become a Christian. Having said that, I do not know of anyone who has had to undergo a panel thing. They have informed the magistrate, and the magistrate has just sat on it. Conversion, there's a UN Special Rapporteur who said this, that the only way you know that a country has religious freedom is if they have the right to convert. Conversion is the test case. If you can't convert out of a faith, what is the point of saying that you have religious freedom? You don't. You have a right to have a religion, barely. That's the test case. Conversion is the test case, and in many countries now, across, because this conversion laws are not unique to India. We have them in Nepal, you have them in Bhutan, you have them in Myanmar, and many other countries also, Malaysia. You can't change your religion so easily. You have to go to the Sharia court. The Sharia court will take years on end before they even allow you to leave your religion. So this is a big problem. Change of religion is the test.
Is the Indian government active, and I think it's true in Nepal, I don't know what other country, where the Indian government is actually proactively trying to influence to make more anti-conversion laws. Is that true? And if so, how are they doing it, or how are they exerting that pressure?
So both Nepal and Sri Lanka are examples of how the Hindutva movement is trying to create hostility and violence around this issue of conversion. So they're raking it up. There have been instances in both Nepal and in Sri Lanka. And as those incidents increase, then the government's response is, we need a law to ensure that, In Nepal, they've managed even into the constitution, where, your Sanatan Dharma is protected as the foremost religion, and then they also say you shouldn't say or do anything that will sort of hurt the religious sentiments of anyone else, and then any sort of propagation sort of falls under that.
Hurting the religious sentiments of someone else
Yeah.
is not about what you said. If their feelings are hurt, you have broken the law.
Right.
Because anybody can go and say, my feelings were hurt.
Yeah. We recently had a situation in India at the Supreme Court. One of the lawyers has thrown his shoe at the Chief Justice of India because his feelings were hurt. So you're throwing shoes in the Supreme Court of India because of hurt feelings.
How do we pray? As American Christians, as Christians in other nations, how do we pray for India, the country as a whole, but especially for our Christian brothers and sisters?
Please be praying that as the Supreme Court is hearing many of these anti-conversion law cases, it's looking at the constitutionality of it. One, that these cases would be heard quickly because they've been pending for many years. But the courts would also be able to see the strength of the argument. They would be able to recognize and really protect religious freedom and protect the rights of everyone who wants to change their faith. So that's something that we really need. And also favor and wisdom for the church that is under a lot of, that the church remain faithful, and as was prayed, that give us boldness, Lord, at this time to be able to walk, because there is a tendency, don't say as much, and you will also shy away from showing love to your neighbor, so that the church would continue to do that faithfully, that we would be found faithful in this time.
How much do you worry about you as you are representing these cases, representing Christians, and trying to hold the government to account?
There is real fear. There are people getting picked up by the government all the time. We've had recently a very prominent activist get picked up in Ladakh, and his wife is at the Supreme Court, and the courts take a long time to hear these cases also. So there is real fear, and that's okay, but that's all right.
I want to encourage our listeners to pray for India, but also to pray for you, because it is very important work that you're doing, but it is dangerous. There is a risk involved.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
We've been talking this week on Voice of the Martyrs Radio with Sister Joti. As she mentioned, that's not her real name. We want to protect her as much as we can. She is a human rights lawyer in the nation of India, and I would encourage you this week to pray for the nation of India, to pray for our brothers and sisters there, to be courageous and faithful in spite of the price that they are paying right now. And I hope you'll be back with us next week as we talk about what God is doing all around the world. Yes, it is costly. Yes, our brothers and sisters are paying a huge price, but God is still at work in India, in Nepal, in Bhutan, in Malaysia, and around the world. And I hope you'll join us again next week right here on the Voice of the Martyrs Radio Network.